Welcome to Cody in the Cinema. Today, I'm discussing Day of the Outlaw, the 1959 black and white Western classic featuring Robert Ryan in the lead role, as well as Burl Ives, in an amazing, career-defining performance, in my opinion. And what better way to spend a Christmas Eve than to watch Burl Ives in a Western set in a snowy, isolated Wyoming town. I've been listening to quite a bit of Burl Ives lately for Christmas time, and so it just felt right to do a rewatch. And I wanted to make a video as I'm a big fan of this movie, despite a few little things I don't like, but overall, I think Day of the Outlaw is a little bit under-discussed, a little bit underappreciated, and if you do love the snowy Westerns that are kind of more psychologically driven, I do think you're going to really enjoy this one. Now, we do start out in an isolated Wyoming town, and we learn that there's a love triangle that involves Robert Ryan's character and two others. That part of the film isn't the best. However, in the midst of them working out this love triangle, which does take a few minutes to get through, Burl Ives and a group of outlaws come into a bar, and you get a really good, memorable character there in this captain that he plays. Captain Brun is charismatic. He's a little scary. He's commanding. You know, if you've listened to Burl Ives sing or act, he does sound authoritative, and it serves the film well, and his performance does keep you glued to the screen. Some of you probably like The Big Country. I actually think he's even better in this film than he is in that movie, even though I like both performances. He tells his outlaws, as they're waiting for this weather to pass in this little town, that, you know, we're not going to have women, we're not going to have whiskey, and we're not going to be shooting. We're going to keep our heads on straight. And he's having trouble keeping this group of thugs and bandits kind of contained. There's a scene where he does eventually allow them to dance, but it's not great because even though he's been trying to keep the women separate from the men, like now they're all dancing, and it's just really awkward and painful to watch. Robert Ryan's character is kind of your anti-hero. Nothing too extraordinary there, although I think Robert Ryan is always a pretty good tough guy in these movies. I really like this setup. If you've ever seen the setup, you might like it. Now, I thought of a few film comparisons that might help people who haven't heard of this kind of, know what they're getting into. And the most obvious would be something like Shane, where there is some friction between different people who want to claim rights to the land. That comes up in the love triangle part of the story, as well as the outlaws who have come in and sort of taken over the town. There's not a real sense of law and order in the town, so Burl Ives' character becomes it. But I think if you like Shane, you'll find parts of this at least enjoyable, although Shane is, again, one of the all-time best Westerns. Moreover, I really think the people who are a fan of The Gunfighter will like Day of the Outlaw. Now, The Gunfighter is a little bit better of a movie. Again, this is one of the best Westerns ever made, but it's one of those Westerns that sort of takes place inside a bar, and, you know, there's a lot of talking, a lot of philosophical meandering. I think if you like this vibe, you might get into The Day of the Outlaw. And, you know, low budget kind of movie. Those of you that have been enjoying the Bud Bedecker Westerns, you're going to see a little bit of that flavor as well. I will say Randolph Scott has a little bit more screen presence in general than Robert Ryan had in this movie sometimes, but still a pretty good actor. There are maybe the shots in the snow aren't maybe as impressive as something that I've talked about recently, like Marketa Lazarova, you know, but it's still this beautifully bleak atmosphere. And when the horses at one point are trying to trudge through the snow, through the hillside, it's convincing in that way, and it's visual storytelling. And it's kind of a neat thing about this plot that this town is like the end of civilization. You don't actually get as much of that as you'd think in Westerns, right? Like a lot of times I've found that in a Western, the town is connecting to another town. Here, this is it. This is where everything ends and stops. And that serves multiple characters well, including the conflict. So the reason this movie has so much tension is that once we establish how dangerous the outlaws are and how there are women in the town, and these men have not been around women in a long time, and they're bad people, and that Burl Ives and his command is literally the only thing separating these men from doing awful things and not doing them. And the fact that he is in jeopardy throughout the film, and even his command at times. But it's well established that you don't cross the man. There's a line about it where one of the characters says, have you ever basically, like, I'm rephrasing this, but have you ever seen anybody actually mess with him? Yeah, you don't want to, There's a lot left of suggestion. Like it is the case in great black and white films, you kind of have to do a lot of inferencing with this one. I love watching him command this group, though. I think it's such a neat Western character because it's not that often that you see an anti-hero kind of leader of a group of bandits behave in this particular manner. In some ways, he's just a total gentleman. There's one scene where he sort of rescues a lady in a gentleman-like fashion. And I think if you were to watch this film, what you'll probably take away from it mostly is that performance. But because I like Burl Ives so much in the film, it's kind of a classic for me within the Western genre that might be in my top 20 Westerns. There are some other interesting plot lines too. There's one cowboy who's just joined the group of bandits and he doesn't seem to fit in too well. And he kind of gets associated with the town as he goes along. I liked him a lot. Sometimes that trope is a little bit overdone. Now that trope isn't Shane. There's a character that goes through a similar thing, if you know who I'm thinking of. But it's convincing here. There's a good fight with Robert Ryan out in the snow and some other characters. And I do think it makes great use of snow. If you've ever been driving in snow and you get stuck in snow, that feeling is ever present in this film. There is a line in here, and I was writing it down as I was watching, and it roughly reads from Burl Ives, because he used to be a soldier, now he's turned outlaw. I made up my mind to be all soldier, which doesn't leave much room for being human. And there's a basic humanity lacking for many people in this town. This is a political movie in some ways. You're getting a subtle message about how violence ultimately takes or retakes or captures or whatever with land and a population or a territory. Sometimes it's subtle, sometimes it's not as subtle, but that's a part of the film. And overall, this is just something that if you haven't seen The Day of the Outlaw and you like a snowy Western, and you like some of these other Westerns I mentioned, you probably want to see it and tell me your reaction. Because like I said, I don't love the love triangle part of this movie, and I do think it takes it a minute to kind of get going. And the ending, the ending's a little too neat and tidy for me to fully embrace. But those things are kind of minor inconveniences to an otherwise great movie. This is a good script, it's smart, and it's just, man, it's bleak. You don't feel good in this movie. I think there's one joke in the whole movie where this guy isn't supposed to have whiskey or whatever, and he just pours the bottle up really quick. That's the joke that the film allows. Tonally very consistent and works well with that foreboding winter energy. So those are my thoughts on Day of the Outlaw. Have you seen it before? If you have, you'll have to let me know your thoughts. Or if you're a Robert Ryan fan in general, I haven't seen The Longest Day. I know he's in that and so many others. But if you do like the content here today, if you want to do me a favor and click that like button, because like buttons do grow YouTube channels And consider subscribing if you haven't. Always love seeing new subscribers. I love talking with you all about, your thoughts on film and these movies in general. With that having been said, we'll see you next time on Cody in the Cinema.